You're seeing automakers and others investing in lithium in terms of, lithium exploration, lithium development, lithium mining. And that to me is an indication that they're comfortable that this is a commodity that is going to be a critical component to their end products for the foreseeable future.
Hello there and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. My name's Rick Nuske. I'm your host. I'm also the luckiest person in the world to be able to host this show for you. If you're new to the show, welcome. I know that you're in for a treat because on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming CEO of Eureka Lithium, Mr. Jeff Wilson. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Rick. It's nice to be here.
Absolute pleasure to have you here. Now, you and I are going to be talking about all things lithium, including what it is, where it's found, industries that use it, and the benefits of lithium prospecting in the Nunavik Quebec region. So there's certainly a lot to unpack there. But as mentioned earlier, we usually spend a bit of time learning a little bit about you. So tell me, where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, so I'm here in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada on the West Coast. Heading out of what's been a fairly mild winter and unfortunately not getting a lot of skiing done this time of year, but we're having quite unusually warm weather. So that's where I'm situated.
Fantastic. Thank you for the feedback. Now, is that where you live or do you travel there, or tell us a little bit about that?
No, this is my home. We're head office here, and this is really kind of a bit of a hub for the junior mineral exploration businesses. I'm sure you're aware, and so within about 3 or 4 blocks radius of this location are a great number of mining executives and mining companies. There's a hub of activity around here.
I love talking all things mining, and we're going to certainly be doing that. But tell me a little bit about local landmarks and what you love about where you live.
Well, I mean, Vancouver is one of these unique cities that has the wonderful combination of, first of all, seasons. We've certainly got all 4 seasons here.
Yep.
But I think the thing that I like most about it is it's a place where you can ski within 30, 40 minutes in the winter months, and you can be on a beach in 20 or 30 minutes in the summer months. And sometimes when there's a straddle in between, you can even do them on the same day. So it's, beautiful scenery, beautiful landscape here. And I think, we've sort of got the wonders of, being coastal and on the ocean, but also having the mountains. And so there's a great, outdoor sort of activity and lifestyle out here on the West Coast of Vancouver.
So I think it's, very different approach that the My Future Business Show takes in terms of talking about lithium and all the things that you're involved with, but always love to learn a little bit about the people behind the business. So I'm wondering, when you go out, do you socialize? Do you like to go out for a meal? And if you do, what's your favorite food?
Well, I mean, I love a great steak, and I will say that some of the better steakhouses that I visited are actually not here in Vancouver. You go to some cities like New York and other locations where it's had some wonderful food. But there's great restaurants here. There's a great sort of scene here with respect to concerts and sporting activities and hockey games and soccer, professional soccer team here as well. So lots to do. Certainly a growing international community here too. There's a lot of international students that are in Vancouver, so it's a vibrant place. And it used to be in the downtown core here where my office is situated. Used to be the type of place where everybody came in the morning and was gone again by the afternoon or evening. And now a number of communities have sort of popped up within downtown Vancouver. So it's a very vibrant place, during the week as well as on weekends and evenings as well as during the day. So there's lots to do. Always lots to do.
Place to be. Now, you touched on hockey. I know it's a national favorite. Tell me, do you have a favorite team?
Well, here in Vancouver, we're Canucks fans, and we've been hard done by here for over 50 years. The franchise has been in existence.
Of course.
We've never won a championship, but we've got a team currently that is in first place in the league. So there's a lot of bandwagon jumpers hopping onto the bandwagon here, prepping up for what could be an exciting end to the season.
Fantastic.
So we're excited about that. Yeah.
I know that we all have a childhood somewhere along the line. Tell us a little bit about yours. Did you grow up in the same place that you're living now?
Essentially, I was born right here in downtown Vancouver. I now live a little bit out in the suburbs, but I've lived in Vancouver my entire life, with the exception of going outside of the country for my university studies. But outside of that, this is a place that even when I've gone away or traveled or for short stints lived in other places, always sort of knew that I'd come back to Vancouver for, because of the things we talked about early on, as well as, my family's all here, and it's just kind of where most of my circle is situated.
It's always fascinating to learn about people's backgrounds and the people that were there in those formative years to see how they've developed into the people that they've become today. In your case, a CEO of a lithium mining company. I'm wondering who in those earlier years was influential in your life?
Well, certainly my parents were, and in fact, my mother, if which was quite an unusual thing in the 70s, was in the mining sector, and worked with a number of groups in the mining sector, doing a lot of sort of corporate secretary type work. And so I was exposed to that as a young kid. I remember coming downtown to the office to see my mom, sometimes at the end of the day before we'd go out, somewhere or something like that, and just always having an interest in sort of business and sort of that office atmosphere with lots going on, so when I finished university, I was lucky enough to go and put in some time working in companies that I had some connections with, and so again, a little bit of knowing the right people certainly helped. The
Yeah.
early stages of my career was really just me wanting to learn as much as I could about business. So I didn't have any preconceived ideas about what I was or who I was going to be in terms of status or titles or anything like that. I just wanted to learn, and so I learned every aspect of sort of the capital markets and junior mining industry, from accounting to map making to doing some prospecting with geologists, and ultimately sort of vectored towards investor relations and sort of the finance and the capital market side of things, and marketing of stories and communicating with brokers and fund managers. And so after having great exposure to lots of aspects of the business, I was able to sort of find where my niche was situated, and that sort of expanded from doing investor relations with groups of companies, to starting my own investor relations consulting firm, to then leveraging those relationships. I've now been in the business nearly 30 years, so about 15 16 17 years ago, leveraging that early network that I had established early in my career into taking on more senior roles as director and officer of companies, and so my background is largely on the marketing and the capital raising side of the business. But when you wear the CEO hat in a small junior exploration company, the advantage of having learned about a lot of different aspects of the business certainly pays off, and helps me now in mitigating cost and staying focused and able to oversee all aspects of the business, regardless of what my title may be.
Now, spending many years in the mining sector myself, I always enjoyed, although I was more corporate, away from the field, I always enjoyed going to the field. Is that something that's on your agenda? Is that something you do?
Yeah, it really is. And I think sometimes a lot of people in the corporate roles, sort of take that for granted, or don't recognize the importance of that. I mean, to me, there's nothing quite like, sitting in a truck and driving to site, whether it's, is it easy? Is it a long, arduous journey?
I know what you're talking about.
Is it helicopters? Is it trucks? Is it, so that kind of stuff is really important. And obviously, getting an understanding of, certainly the lay of the land and topography, and how difficult some places may be to work. And also, of course, getting to know, the local people, the local communities, the local decision makers and politicians. And again, I think there's great value in having that sort of firsthand experience of having been in those places, and taking the time to shake the hands of the people that you impact, and hopefully impact in a positive way. So yeah, I think going to site is very valuable, and it's especially valuable when you're sitting at a boardroom table telling an investor or potential investor about your wonderful asset. I think there's a layer of familiarity if you've been there, and sort of sat in the chair and gone to these things, in a truck, that sort of
That's a level of authenticity that you can't sort of fake, isn't it? But
thing.
tell us about your role at Eureka Lithium, how you got involved.
Yeah, so Eureka Lithium is a company that I formed with some colleagues of mine, as essentially as a shell. Noting that there were opportunities emerging in the mining space. We wanted to have a vehicle at the ready that was sort of on the hunt for the right asset or the right opportunity to bring into the company and set it on a path forward. And so I was approached by a group that had aligned with a very well-known and renowned prospector here in Canada by the name of Sean Ryan, who's been very successful at in the gold space in terms of, again, acquiring claims, staking claims, doing some early prospecting, vending those projects into companies that then turn those into discoveries, and in turn some of those into takeovers by major mining companies. So a really good pedigree and a really good track record. And so Sean came to me with this concept, and with claims that he had staked in northern Quebec as lithium prospects. And we sort of thought, this is the right mix. I mean, this is an opportunity that we think can capture the attention of the market. We'll be able to raise capital, and it's got the real potential here, albeit that it's relatively early stage assets, but it's got the potential to really, it's got the earmarks to really, be some sort of a major discovery, all going well. Obviously
Absolutely.
exploration is high risk, but we sort of saw the land package combined with the tight structure of the company as a great opportunity to enter into the lithium exploration space.
Now, there might be some prospective investors looking at this and they want to know a little bit more about Sean Ryan. I was going to ask you a bit more about him later on, but just share a little bit about the significance of Sean and his background.
Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously in a lot of these cases with junior exploration companies such as Eureka Lithium, you're really betting on the jockey here. I mean, at the end of the day, this is high risk. This is exploration.
Yeah.
And so you want to, sort of rely upon, if you will, the track record or experience of the people involved. And, I've been lucky enough to be involved in some wins in the market before, where I really have aligned with good geological expertise, and that's translated into exploration success and in the end investor success. And so seeing Sean's background as a guy who has gone into places like the Yukon and staked ground that ultimately was part of a $500 million takeover some years ago, and then entering into Newfoundland here in Canada, doing the same sort of thing, and again creating a big staking rush on the back of his sort of initial foray into that location.
Yeah.
It's a track record for applying the same sort of methodologies and systems that have proven to be successful. So when Sean saw the opportunity in lithium to identify an area that had maybe been for some reason overlooked or underappreciated in terms of its potential to host meaningful deposits of lithium. When someone like that comes to you with a concept, and more than a concept, I mean, there was quite a bit of data to support the thesis. For me, it was a no-brainer to say, okay, well, look, I think we can attract the capital necessary to do the work, to explore this region properly, and see if we can, in fact, uncover or identify a meaningful lithium deposit.
Well, we're certainly going to be talking a little bit more about the Nunavik Quebec region later on in the show, but there'd be a lot of people here looking for further information, maybe a little bit of education on what lithium actually is. I'm wondering if you can share that with us.
Yeah, I mean, lithium has become sort of the, sort of, if you will, the clean energy savior, if you will, on some level here over the course of the last couple of years. And really that spurs out of the increased demand for lithium-ion batteries. And
Yeah.
so what we've seen is primarily, the big driver and probably the most tangible to, the average person is electric vehicles. The demand from governments, around the world to start to implement and create policies that are stipulating that electric vehicles have to become the way of the future has created quite a bit of concern globally, but certainly within the auto manufacturing sector as to where are we going to find the supply of lithium to feed this new demand. And so now you're seeing major automakers sort of clamoring to secure enough supply of lithium to fulfill these obligations that are being imposed by Canadian, U.S. and other governments around the world. So it's a commodity that's been around for a long time. But as you see in other, we saw this, for example, we're seeing a little bit now, but we saw it certainly in the mid 2000s with uranium, where certainly this concern for supply drives the price of the commodity. And I think that's what we saw say 2 or 3 years ago in lithium, the pricing really started to run, and there was great concern for demand. And what you've seen over the last couple of years is an increase in the number of companies that are looking for it, an increase in the investment dollars supporting the search for it. But to this point, we still haven't come anywhere near identifying the type of supply that's going to be necessary to fuel the demand that we see, even between now and 2030, never mind beyond. So
Yeah.
we're in a supply crunch here where we're just not sure where it's going to come from, and that's put an emphasis on explorers and developers and extractors to go out and try to secure that lithium largely for these electric vehicle initiatives.
Very interesting times indeed. Thank you very much for sharing, Jeff. Now, tell me, are there different types of lithium, or is at a substrate level, or is it all the same?
There are, and there's different types of lithium, in the same way that, gold deposits, come in different forms that
Yeah.
require different forms of processing and extraction and mining. Yes, you do have different types of lithium. There's sort of hard rock lithium. There's clay hosted lithium, brines. So there's different deposits, and I think ultimately, I guess the price of lithium will dictate. Obviously, the most economic to extract will always be sought first, but if that's not fueling the demand, I think you'll start to see it trickle down into just about any type of lithium that can be
Yep.
extracted, as long as it can be extracted economically.
Having had many years in stope mining and surface exploration drilling myself, I always wonder about the process for extracting core samples and the likes of lithium. Tell us a little bit about that process and how you're going about actually exploring for it.
Yeah, the exploration process is a little bit, I don't want to say it's easier than perhaps, your sort of traditional, precious metal or base metal exploration. But,
Yeah.
largely in the areas where we're working, you can see, the sort of the appropriate rock types, generally speaking, at surface. And so you can almost prospect with a drone or by helicopter
Oh, wow.
by seeing sort of this, this gray material, that rock type that is quite prevalent, certainly where we're exploring. And it allows us to sort of, even from Google Earth, you can sort of target these, what show up as sort of white or gray masses of rock in areas where, that's sort of got the best place to go and do, your rock sampling, surface sampling. Of course, you do, soils and sediment
Mhm.
sampling as well on a more broader scale. But if you're looking for sort of something to sort of vector in on as a starting point, that exploration technique has worked quite well for us. From there, there are various, much like what would, some people may be aware of, an XRF device for scanning for sort of base metal and trace metal elements in rock types. There are these lib devices or laser devices handheld that one can use in the field, again, to scan rocks and see whether or not, you get a lithium reading. It doesn't necessarily give you the same accuracy as assay results or analytical results from the laboratory,
Mm.
but it is, again, an ability to, on the fly in the field, continue to vector, and rather than sort of collecting a number of samples and sending them back to the lab and then waiting weeks for those results to come back to tell you where the most prospective areas are.
Yeah.
We've got crews in the field that are able to utilize these handheld devices as an instantaneous mechanism for sort of qualifying and quantifying the results that they're sampling.
I'm thinking about top level topography, and it suggests that, given what you've just shared with us, Jeff, that the search area would go wide. But if you do hit a vein, let's call it, for lack of better ways to put it, does it go deep? And if so, how deep would a pocket go?
Yeah, they can go quite deep. What we would be looking for ultimately is something that's more flat lying, something that's more near surface, and of
Mm.
course, thereby slightly easier extraction. But these things, again, like any other mineral deposit, they come in all kinds of different forms and shapes, and Mother Nature has put these things sometimes in quite unique
Oh,
arrangements.
yeah.
So yeah, it's varied. Yeah, it's definitely varied.
So tell me a little bit about the commodities, and why is lithium so different from other commodities?
Well, I guess, like anything that, we go through these cycles, and our world is quite cyclical in this way. And, a lot of these things simply fall off the radar in terms of being explored for. I mean, unlike, let's say, gold or copper that are sort of constantly, there are companies and individuals that are out looking for these things. Certain commodities, sort of fall off the radar, if you will, and are not being particularly actively sought, either because they're not in high demand, or the price of the commodities, is not driving investor interest to go find it. And certainly with lithium, this has been a commodity that over the course of decades has really not been highly sought after until this sort of new resurgence, if you will, in the or emergence, maybe is the right word,
Yeah.
in lithium batteries.
Yep.
And so that's really been a driver that's kind of brought about a bit of an education process for a lot of people. I mean, we're talking about Sean Ryan as the prospector behind Eureka, and I've evidenced at the very beginning. Sean was traditionally a gold explorer. And
Yep.
so what you're finding is you're sort of finding people identifying the opportunity in lithium. And so you go through this process of a little bit of education and trying to figure some things out, and get to sort of understand the nuances of that commodity and the exploration techniques that are best suited for identifying it. And so there's a bit of a process that, I think as a sector we've sort of gone through. The investment community does sometimes get a little bit ahead of itself. And so we saw a real flood of interest in lithium, I would say, is sort of 2021, 2022, maybe going back to 2020 even. And a real increase in the price of the commodity. I mean, it went up,
Quadrupled.
exponentially. Yeah, it
Yep.
went up exponentially. It was very, very high. And one of the things I point out in anytime I have an opportunity to speak to somebody about lithium is that what we're seeing now is that the price of lithium has had, the other side of that run up is that it's come off quite a bit in the last, say, year and a half. Where I see that as positive is that oftentimes what we see with these kinds of commodities, especially that have a very specific end use, is that if the price gets too high, the end users start to look for alternatives, because boy, we can't keep putting this incredibly expensive commodity in our product, because it's going to drive up the price of our product to a point where consumers won't be able to afford it. So I think seeing lithium come down, away from these sort of euphoric levels that it was at a year and a half, 2 years ago in terms of its spot price, and bringing it down to a level here now, which is still significantly higher than it was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, but starting to find a range that I think can then allow, let's say, for example, automakers to feel comfortable that, okay, this is not going to throw off the economics of production.
Yep.
Let's go out and make sure that our assembly lines are equipped to be able to build, electric vehicles for the next 10, 20, 15 years, and not be thrown off in the interim by, some price crunch that forces us to look at alternatives. So I think the price of lithium, finding its sort of finding a range here right now, I think is net beneficial. I think it will be better for those of us in the sector to not sort of be chasing this overbought sort of commodity price that is unsustainable. So I think that's where we are now, and I think that you're seeing automakers and others investing in lithium in terms of, lithium exploration, lithium development, lithium mining. And that to me is an indication that they're comfortable that this is a commodity that is going to be a critical component to their end products for the foreseeable future.
And not only that, I mean, because that was clearly something I wanted to talk about, was why were they wanting to get so close to the mining groups? And it seems to me that it's not only cost driven, but also ease of manufacture, ease of source and supply. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, there's a number of different factors, and it's difficult for me to sort of, touch on
Nail
all of them.
one.
But I think,
Yep.
certainly you've got groups that are, this is one of these unique, in my, almost 30 years in the mining sector, there hasn't been as much of a sort of a global push for something to do with mining to be prompted and promoted. And what we're seeing is, because lithium is tied with not only a commodity that we need for an end use, but it's associated with clean energy. it's associated with, sort of an improved environment. Not only are people who need lithium for their automobiles looking for it, but I think more broadly, the population is interested in investing in these types of initiatives because they're for the greater good of the planet, assuming
Mm.
we all want to go electric. So yes, you're seeing obviously Elon Musk and Tesla have put an enormous amount of nearly $1 billion into sort of identifying and securing an ongoing supply of lithium. You're seeing it with General Motors. You've seen it with what is now, well, with which is the former Chrysler, again, somewhere close to $500 million in investment. And so, these automakers are sort of leading the charge in terms of recognizing that supply is in short supply,
What number?
and
Yep.
the demand is going up. And so, wanting to see far enough down the path to say, look, if we're going to want this stuff even in the future, we need to start the process today because, as you and I'm sure many of your listeners are aware, I mean, the process to go from finding a meaningful deposit to, extracting that deposit and the minerals within that deposit is often quite a lengthy timeline. You could be
Mm.
looking at 10 plus years.
Yep.
So if the likes of Tesla and GM and Ford want to have the necessary supply of lithium 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, they need to start providing support for those who are out looking for it now. And so you're seeing them investing in mineral exploration companies. You're seeing them investing in mining operations, again, because it's going to be critical to their ability to feed the demand of these vehicles, and again, to bring down the pricing. The more that all of the critical elements and components of making up that vehicle, the more readily available that is. One would like to think that the pricing, of course, for the consumer is better. So that I think has been a big push for a lot of automakers, but also investors to get behind the initiative to go out and find more of these critical metals.
It doesn't take much to walk down the street and see Great Wall Motors or Chery or Teslas driving around. It makes me think about I guess the bit of a race between the Chinese manufacturers and the Americans like Tesla and the likes, and putting together these wonderfully technologically advanced products that we are all benefiting from. But it makes me wonder, it's a bit of an issue in terms of security of supply. So how is it that we deal with that side of things?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think, again, unlike certain other sectors I've been in, gold and silver and copper, this is a big aspect of
The big one.
the lithium story, and I think, quite frankly, multiple other sort of critical metals, if you will. With what we're seeing in the world today, with respect to trade relations, tensions between nations,
Mm.
tied in with this sort of shortfall of certain commodities, you're seeing governments start to let's 20 years ago, yeah, we'll extract and attain all the necessary sort of nasty stuff from
Mm.
some far off land and let them extract it, and we'll just ship it here, and we'll sort of be the end user or the net buyer. What we're seeing now is that you're seeing Canada, the US recognizing the importance of securing these things and not being at the mercy of countries that maybe we don't want to be at the mercy of,
Yeah.
globally, and trade relations and various other aspects. And so you're seeing, not only you're seeing a desire to secure the supply of these things within one's own borders,
Locally. Yep.
but also you're seeing government incentives to promote or assist in the exploration and development of mining of these commodities within our own borders. So we're seeing, the U.S. government is now incentivizing critical metal exploration and development. There are government grants to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars if
Mm.
you're out looking to exploit, vanadium or cobalt or lithium or these other critical metals. And in Canada, there's various tax incentives, not only for the companies that are out exploring for these things, but also for investors. If you invest as a Canadian investor into a company that is going to spend your invested money in Canada,
Yep.
there are tax credits for those investors who are, financially assisting companies, let's say like Eureka, in spending that and deploying that money to secure supply here. So yes, I think that this is a unique time in history where no longer is it okay to just kind of get all our necessary, like I said, sort of nasty stuff, if you will, from somewhere else. But
Yep.
let's secure it within our own borders. Let's have our own rules and regulations about how it's extracted, so that we know that it's being done properly, and again, not be at the mercy of others.
Well, tell me a little. Let's shift gears a little bit, Jeff, and talk a little bit about why you chose Nunavik in Quebec for prospecting. What's so good about it?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Quebec is a highly well endowed mineral jurisdiction. I mean,
Mm.
there's mining for all kinds of different commodities in that province. Furthermore, that province, in fact, as much or more than any other province in the country of Canada, provides some of the greatest incentives for companies coming in and, as I said, exploring there, spending money there, to the tune of actually getting 40% of your exploration expenditures back in the way of credits from the Quebec government. So there's an incentive to come to Quebec to explore and to stay in Quebec exploring because of job creation, taxes, infrastructure improvements, all the things that mining and mineral exploration bring to communities.
Yeah.
So for that reason, Quebec is a bit of a slam dunk. As it relates to lithium exploration, Quebec again has been a bit of a hotspot globally for lithium exploration, sort of in the southwestern part of the province, in an area in and around a place called James Bay. There's been quite a focus and really a bit of a staking rush, if you will, in that region, and there's been some high flyers and successes there. And so it's become, certainly, Quebec has kind of become synonymous within Canada for lithium exploration. Where we saw an opportunity, and when I say we, really it was Sean Ryan, saw
Mm.
an opportunity up north, was that twofold. One is it had the right geology, the right geological environment. So there was some geophysical information known about that part of Quebec that again was favorable for the potential to host meaningful mineralization. But most importantly, there had been a province-wide government survey of lake bottom sediment sampling throughout the entire province of Quebec. And quite frankly, much to my surprise, when Sean presented this to me, Sean went through that database and had identified that some of the highest lithium readings in that lake bottom sediment sampling survey by the Quebec government were in fact within Nunavik in northern Quebec,
Ah.
not in the James Bay region where
Yep.
everybody was exploring. And and when I say some of the highest readings, I mean I'm talking about the 99.5 percentile kind of stuff. And
That's
that maybe more
significant.
importantly, yeah, I mean, hugely significant and really stood out to me. But perhaps equally or more important is that some of these high grade readings were actually identified in clusters. And so you could look at a map of these survey results and see these data points and identify that, hey, there's a whole bunch of 99.9 percentile or 99.5 percentile here, and there's another cluster of them here and another cluster of them here. And so Sean was able to identify what looked like the biggest areas with sort of the greatest lithium readings in, like I say, in that northern third of Quebec. And again, surprisingly, the most of that ground was available for staking, and so he was able to go in and stake big land packages. Again, critical in early stage
Of
exploration.
course.
You want to have as much room as possible to allow yourself to vector toward the sweet spots. And so, big land packages available for staking, and land packages that hosted some of the highest concentrations of lithium readings in a government survey. So, and again, it was a very extensive survey. I mean, this wasn't just let's take some samples wherever it's easy to take samples. They did a really broad, detailed sampling
Grid
campaign
crossed.
in the
Yep.
province. Yeah, so it was. So that was quite compelling. And I mean, these, you know, but for our sake on some of our maps, I mean, these pink dots on a map, really, really do stand out as being kind of these anomalous areas, and these are areas that we were able to pick up. So on top of that, this part of Quebec is known for its nickel mining and nickel mineralization. They're one of the
Mm.
largest nickel mines in the world is located in this area. Along with that, of course, you get local communities that are familiar with mining. You get access to deep sea ports. There's airstrips not too far away. So again, if you're going to go somewhere somewhat remote, you've got to look at, hey, if we find it, can we build it? And I think this is a part of Quebec where there's, an enormous amount of sort of prospective land. It's underexplored. It's got all the right affinities, and it's in a place where, with mining history, where the infrastructure for mining is there. So all of that put together for us made a very strong and compelling case for us to pursue this with
Three ticks in the box for sure and certain. Now, given the survey data that you've just shared from the local government, it seems that they're fairly well on board. What's the relationships like with your local governments?
Yeah, it's quite good. I mean, and with respect to the local government, the provincial government has given us sort of the green light on sort of all stages of exploration that includes drilling. So we don't, like a lot of jurisdictions, you go out, you acquire the ground, and you go out and you do some prospecting and sampling and mapping, maybe some trenching and geophysics, but ultimately you've got to go back to the government with applications for drill permitting.
Yep.
Which in some places can take a long time. In Quebec, that's not the case. So our sort of mineral tenures, if you will, we are permitted to drill at any time, and that's property wide. So that's a wonderful advantage.
Excellent.
And step up from the delays that sometimes come from permitting when you're dealing with governments. The only sort of caveat to that I will say is that the government does ask that operators in the area speak to the local Indigenous people and First Nations people, and there are communities not right where we are, but sort of proximal to where we were working, and so right from day one we've initiated communications there and been very, very transparent, and in fact have initiated some work on behalf of those local communities in assisting them with some initiatives that they were looking to have a helping hand with, and so we did that. So our relationship's been very good.
Yep.
We've been given and granted all the necessary permits, and so the local community is very much on side and sees the upside potential for all of us if we have some level of success in our exploration.
I always get excited when I used to go FIFO and have a look around different project sites and the logistics involved in setup, transportation, movement, people in, people out, all that type of thing. Now, tell me a little bit about some of the different projects that are going on. I understand that there's Raglan West, Raglan South, New Leaf, and Lac Lamont. Is that correct?
Yes, Lac Lamont is still sort of at the letter of intent stage, so we don't actually have a deal secured on that yet. But
Right.
that's something that we recently announced as a new addition. The other three projects you mentioned are projects where again, admittedly this is early stage exploration, and so we secured the transaction last year. In June, and by transaction I mean we secured 100% rights to the projects. We then did a significant capital raise, and then engaged a contract exploration team to sort of initiate the logistics and kind of hit the ground running. And what I'll say about that is we probably missed a little bit of the field season last year in trying to get the deal closed and get sort of our ducks in a row to be able to get in the field.
Yeah.
However, we did do a first pass program of getting crews and boots on the ground, prospecting, sampling, mapping, going into the areas that we thought were the most prospective, at least from a desktop perspective, and getting in there with detailed sampling and mapping. Again, we then, went in a second time, looked at some peripheral areas, maybe areas that didn't stand out quite as much, but when boots were on the ground, guys recognized some opportunities. So we did a pretty extensive campaign of prospecting, mapping, and sampling late last year, trying to sort of figure out, okay, within these property packages, where do we want to spend, more time or more detailed time? And we're sort of still waiting for some of the final data from that evaluation, interpretation of that. But the benefit of all of that work that we were able to get in last year, and in fact, we had hoped to get an initial phase of drilling conducted last year, but we just sort of missed
it.
the season. And by the time we were sort of ready to go, it was just not feasible in terms of the amount of daylight and weather. So we thought, let's keep our powder dry, and rather than fighting this, and it'd be very cost prohibitive to try to get in
do
there
it.
at that time of year without. We'll wait, and we'll allow ourselves, a few months in what is, I guess, considered for the off season to compile the data, review and reinterpret all the data, and
Yep.
be in a position to hit the ground running again here this year with the head start of getting in as early as perhaps March or April, depending on the season, and doing a really extensive, aggressive, full campaign between sort of when we get in there until say October, November, something like that.
Very exciting times. Thanks again for the feedback. Now, tell me a little bit about Cobalt Metals. What's their focus and what are they doing in the region?
Yeah, Cobalt is a really exciting story. Cobalt is a private company that is financed and backed, and they've raised over $300 million in the last couple of years, and perhaps significantly more than that before the last couple of years. But they're backed by the likes of Jeff Bezos from Amazon, Bill Gates, Richard Branson. So some of the richest billionaires in the world are supporting Cobalt Metals as with an initiative to go out and identify these important critical metals, and that ties in with how we started this conversation about sort of the demand and the global demand for these things, and the fact that not only are miners, quote unquote miners, out looking for this stuff, but save the world kind of investors are out looking for this stuff as well. Because they think it's net beneficial to the planet, but also I'm sure it's going to feed some of the businesses that they're invested in as well, to have the supply of various critical metals, whether it's cobalt, lithium, nickel, these kinds of things. So they've got initiatives in various parts of the world, not solely in Quebec, but a big focus of their attention is exploring in the same region where we are exploring in Nunavik in northern Quebec. They're looking largely for nickel in that area, as well as other critical metals. But what's important about that for me is that if anytime you go into sort of a new frontier, it's great to be at the forefront, and it's great to be a leader and to be able to sort of pick up what you think is some of the best ground. But it's also quite nice, certainly from an investment standpoint, to bring to attract other investors. It's nice to have neighbors, and it's nice to have notable neighbors that maybe draw more eyeballs to the region where you're working. So Cobalt has been very good for us in sort of validating, I guess you could say, the area where we're working. Being backed by the types of people that they are. I mean, again, the famous saying, where's the smart money going, or follow the smart money. I mean, look, there's some very, very successful investors invested in that company. And I guess the way I look at it is, you can't, as an individual, you can't go out and buy shares of Cobalt Metals because they're a private company and they're not publicly traded. So if you want to have access and exposure to the critical metal exploration going on in that region, you can do so, however, through publicly traded companies such as Eureka Lithium. To get exposure to that. And the other thing that's interesting to me about having cobalt in the region is, look, we're an exploration company. We're an early stage group that is really all about discovery, going out and finding something that wasn't there before. That's where the real value driver is for a lot of investors. It's that 0 to 100 kind of stage where things can really, the trajectory can really take off on a drill hole or multiple drill holes that show, hey, there was nothing here yesterday, and today it's looking like this might be a mineral deposit. And that's where there's real upside for I think, for speculative investors anyway. And but at the end of the day, it's great to go out and maybe make a discovery and find something, but is it the kind of thing that somebody is going to want to ultimately take over or buy out, or come in and enter into? Someone who's got more of an expertise for mining and extraction. And that's where I think someone like Cobalt, with their very, very deep pockets, if we were to find something meaningful on Eureka's ground, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that the folks at Cobalt would take notice, and perhaps there might be might take some interest in that. So that's always a nice possibility.
Absolutely. The future is certainly bright. But if anybody is on this call today, Jeff, and they're looking for more information, because we have literally, pardon the pun, scratched the surface of what we could talk about on today's call. If they want to learn a little bit more about Eureka Lithium and where to get involved with it, where would you send them?
Yeah, well, first things first. I mean, I think the company's website is a great starting point. There's not only sort of corporate information with respect to our news releases and information on the projects. There's also information on a broader scale about lithium and lithium supply demand. There's also some quite interesting videos from the gentleman we've talked about a fair bit here in this call,
Yep.
Sean Ryan, and sort of his thesis on this region and his background. He was a guy that's been covered quite extensively by the media as well. So you can get lots of information on Sean's background. Obviously, the rest of us on management, our bios are there as well. But it's a really good source of both video and sort of text information that people can kind of sink their teeth into. And then, upon further review, if people want to look at, maybe how the stock's been trading or look at the ticker symbols. We trade on the Canadian Stock Exchange, the CSE, under the symbol ERKA. And in the US on the OTCQB, our symbol is UREKF.
Fantastic feedback. I've absolutely loved this call. Now, if anybody's on this call today want to learn anything more about Eureka Lithium, I'll be certainly making sure that you have access to all of the links that are relevant for you to follow up. Do your due diligence as per normal and reach out to Jeff and his team at Eureka Lithium. And with that all being said, Jeff, wonderful call. Thank you very much for joining me on the My Future Business show today.
It's been a pleasure, Rick. Thanks for having me.